By the time most people get to me, they've already consumed a lot of my info and content, and they're just ready to roll. They're like, whatever you say, we trust you.
Welcome to the Real Estate Coffee House. Today's feature is Creole Consistency with Leslie Hinder. Michael and Leslie have a spot saved for you at their table. Enjoy the chat. Welcome to the Real Estate Coffee House podcast. I am Michael Thorne of Remax Lifestyles Realty and the Thorne Maisie Bongers Real Estate Group in Langley, BC. And today's guest is a realtor at Crescent City Living in New Orleans. She's dynamic, resourceful, smart, and very, very entertaining. She is Leslie Hinder. Hey, Leslie, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
I'm pleased to be here.
Leslie and I are going to be pouring over the keys to consistency, but first we have to dig into the news.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Each week we take a few minutes with our guests to dig into a real estate news story, and the story I want to chat with you, Leslie, is an article, and the title is Home Showings Activities Continues to Slow Nationwide as Fewer Buyers Compete for Listings. I know that you do both the buying side and the selling side, but you do have a passion for buyers. And we've really seen buyers be beat up quite a bit over the last number of years. And it looks like there might be a changing of the tide and some opportunities coming back towards the buyers. Are you finding that in your marketplace?
Oh, 100%. We are definitely shifting fast. I knew the week it was happening. I was like, this is it. This is happening, and it came quick. I think right now it's really hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, not just agents, but sellers and even buyers. Buyers don't even realize kind of the position that they are in right now.
Absolutely. And I've talked about this before in the podcast, the optimism I have to my real estate business and the opportunities that are presenting themselves are different than when I saw 2008, 2009, as that was one of my very first big downturns. And I didn't realize that the following year, 2009, would be my best year to date because we were able to identify the opportunities that present themselves in a changing market. And there's no doubt there are going to be some massive opportunities for buyers in the later parts of this year and throughout 2023. So it comes to education and seeing the opportunities. How do you think you're going to go about articulating to the buyers in your market, here's now your opportunity. The tide has changed. The power is going over to you. How do you prep the potential buyers for when it is the right time to jump in and capitalize on opportunities that will present themselves for the first time in a number of years?
So New Orleans has a little bit of a different challenge right now too, where a lot of people are worried about interest rates and stuff. We're actually going through a bonus challenge, if you will. We've had 15 insurance companies pull out of the Gulf South in the last couple of months. So now our buyers are facing astronomical insurance costs on top of these higher interest rates. But this is where we're just going to have to be a little bit patient, or you grab one of the sellers that's smart enough to understand now that their prices are going to have to come down in order for people to be able to afford to buy with these insurance rates as well. So for most of my buyers, I'm telling them, I'm like, look, if you love this house and you want this house, we can go in below list price, which hasn't happened in 2.5 years easily. So it's the ones that are willing to see that, look, we can get in now, where I have other people that kind of want to wait and watch a little bit longer.
There's certainly times where people have to sell due to a myriad of reasons. The one thing people don't have to do is buy. They might have to be in New Orleans, but that doesn't mean they can't stay at a hotel, they can't rent, they can't stay at a friend's couch. And so quite often we'll see when the downturn happens and it moves towards the buyers will pause until they see it at the bottom, where the seller activity is a constant ramping up over time. I think the downturns, when it moves from sellers to buyers, happen quick, but they're drastic.
Yeah, and I mean it is happening super fast, and I agree with you. I think that buyers are just sort of hitting the pause button right now to sort of see what's going to happen. We do have more clients, though, that are looking at investment property because they are seeing the opportunity that's there.
Yeah.
It's just truly about trying to just educate people in the situation and not use like these scare tactics of like, you have to get in now before the interest rates go up or, whatever. So some people just need their time with it, and that's okay too.
The pouring of a fresh cup means we're moving on to the main topic of today's chat with Leslie Hinder. We're talking about the keys to consistency, some of the things you have done, some of the creative things you've done over the years, and the consistency in which you've done them are absolutely remarkable. But whether we're talking about creating content about a community, reaching out to past clients, this consistency chat, the takeaways can be applied in a myriad of different ways. Have you always been an extremely consistent person, or is this a skill you've learned over the years?
You call it consistent. I call it workaholism. No, I think it's just I've always been that way. I'm a Virgo. So it just is, that's just in my nature.
One of the reasons why consistency is so important is I think consistency is the thing that leads to trust the most. That's the reason why McDonald's is such a huge franchise, is it doesn't matter what restaurant you roll into, in what state, the Big Mac is going to be consistent. You know what you're going to get. There's going to be no surprises. So have you found that in the time that you've been consistent with your clients or with people, that it's that trust factor when people meet you, if they've consumed your content regularly over a period of time, it's easy to convert that trust?
100%. And I think even before I got into real estate, I already kind of had that role amongst like my friends, and then even my previous job, I was the person people would come to just kind of, ask for advice and who do you know that does this and whatever. So it was easy to translate when I got into real estate. By the time most people get to me, they've already consumed a lot of my info and content, and they're just ready to roll. They're like, whatever you say, we trust you.
That's amazing. So for the listener, give us a couple of examples of stuff that you put out there that would reflect your ability to be consistent.
So I am a little old school in the fact that I still blog, and I have at least 2 blogs a week that come out. That's really like my biggest piece of content that I'm always putting out there.
Found this article, and it talks about the 4 stages of consistency, and I'd like to get your feedback on each stage. Stage number 1, they say that consistency builds trust. Once your perfect customer discovers you, they'll grow to expect whatever you've established as the norm, which is your consistency. We've already spoken a little bit about that. So let's talk about stage number 2, which is trust then funnels into loyalty. If someone can't trust that you provide him or her with the content that they are looking for, then they aren't going to continue to come back for more. They're going to go somewhere else. So do you have people that not only are in the marketplace right now and they find your content, but people that are consuming your content and then they decide that they need your services, but they've already been a loyal consumer of what you put out there? Have you found that to create loyalty?
Yeah. We had this one woman that called us a couple of years ago. So it's myself and my business partner that, we're a team, but I do all of the actual blogging. And this woman reached out to me and she said, I've read every single blog on your website, every single one. I know everything there is to know. I have a couple of other questions. I said, whatever your questions are, they're about to be turned into blogs. So just know that. But yeah, she had followed me for a couple of years before she finally reached out about buying a house. And she's like, I knew you were my person. You always had the answers. And that was just our first of many that came after that. But I mean, I've been blogging since 2017, maybe 2017. So it's taken time, but the payoff is there.
Well, that's very, very interesting. You have someone that's building a relationship with you over a period of time where you're completely unaware that that's happening.
It's a very one-sided relationship, but they come in knowing a lot about me. So it's kind of neat.
Stage number 3 of the results of consistency is that momentum. And we just sort of really talked about it. The idea that when you're putting out content all the time, sure, the first 2 or 3 people have 2 or 3 pieces of content to put, to go through. This is episode number 4 of the new podcast. There's only 4 episodes. But a year from now, someone that might discover the Real Estate Coffee House podcast will have 100 episodes to dig into. And it's that consistency that creates this momentum of content that you put out a long time ago. You must have occurrences where your blog post from 2018 really helped a buyer or a seller. Even though it's been out there for a long time, it's still providing value.
Yeah, I had I think it was actually in 2018. It was 2018 or 2019. I did this series of blogs too that were about like different client stories and I changed their names, but it was, like really weird, funky situations that we had gotten into. And there is one in particular that I swear anybody who comes to me that's consumed my content, they're like, I want to know who Allie and Max were. And those were the made up names.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I can't tell you who it is, but like, they know it's them and they love the story too. But it's just funny that like, yes, this piece from now 4 years ago, people will still ask me about, it's a good story.
Well, you said something very, very interesting. You're like, when the person reaches out and says, I've got 2 more questions for you. And you respond with, well, that's my next 2 blog posts. The reality is there's only so many questions or concerns or apprehensions buyers and sellers have. Those will stay evergreen. The market might change and the opportunities will change, but once you've answered the question about what an HOA fee is, or the process of going from contingency to close, people can consume that content. And so not only does it pay off in the short term, but your consistency pays off in the long term.
You'd be surprised too at how many new things you can come up with. What's really great, we hired my sister a year ago to be our assistant, and the stuff that she thinks about that I would not think about to put in a blog sometimes. She's like, hey, has anybody ever asked you this question? What do you think about doing this blog? She has actually ramped up my blogging in the past year from her weird questions.
Is it because you're too close to the industry that you don't see it from the buyer's perspective or the seller's perspective as much?
I think sometimes you're just in it too much and we use too much of the same jargon. And so having this other set of eyes on it, it's kind of neat. When I feel like I'm out of inspiration, she'll ask me something. I'm like, oh my God, yes, let me write that,
And stage number 4 to the 4 stages of consistency is then becomes engagement, which is once the word starts going around about your content, whether it's a podcast or video or a blog, people are going to want to start engaging with you. And that's really the key to the things we do, whether that's consistency in maintaining relationships with our past clients, consistency at going out and volunteering. It's all, in my opinion, an effort to start a conversation where then know, like, and trust is built. You've already mentioned it, where people reach out to you and say, I already know who you are. I already know that you're the person for me. That's where that real relationship, that one-on-one relationship can be built.
Yeah. So I write all the content and then it goes out, on our Facebook pages, or we use it in Instagram links. But it's just consistently putting out info. And look, some of those blogs are not really clicked, like what's an HOA fee, whatever. But people know that I'm providing information. Even if that's not the question they have today, they do know that I'm the person who can give them the answer. So when you become consistent like that, what you find is the engagement you get back. I get, no less than 10 messages a day of just random weird questions that people have. Even if they're not looking to buy, they just have a weird question. They don't hesitate to reach out to me because they know I'm going to answer. So that kind of consistency can go a long way, because I've gotten referrals from people that I don't even know them personally.
We have agents that are listening to this right now saying, oh, it's amazing that she's been consistent since 2016. So the question is, in 2022, is it too late to be consistent with content, whether it's blog, whether it's podcast, whether it's video? Is it too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. Ever. Oh my God. One of the times I can't remember if I was stalking you online or if I'd seen you at an event and you were talking about this, video, right? And I forget what it was exactly. And I was like, I am totally going to do that idea. I think it was like 30 places in 30 days or something. Yeah. And I had shoulder surgery and I still did it up until I'm telling you, a week after, I had it until the surgery, and then I took a break and then filmed other stuff. And it didn't do well at all, but I did it and I finished it, and I did make a lot of connections while I was doing it. So not everything's going to be a home run, right? But it was out there and it was consistent and I just kept trying. So even if you get into it and you start feeling like it's not the right thing, you can always pivot. What do you have to lose? People aren't watching all of this anyway. So,
You said something interesting that, like that one blog post about the HOA fee might not be that interesting. And I completely agree with you. And I'll give the example of North Langley 365, which was one of my most daunting efforts I ever took on, which was creating one photo a day for an entire year and writing a little story about it. But what's it like to live in my community? And I became a much better photographer over the year. Of course, like anything, you get better at it. Yeah. But there were some photos that on their own weren't that impressive. But as a part of a larger project, it had its value. And I think you're saying that too about that one answer. That one answer, we might not analyze that one day of that being a really important question to answer, but as a greater, more complete education for buyers and sellers out there, it has its value. Sometimes we get discouraged by that one post or that one blog post that just doesn't resonate, and we forget to look at it as a piece of a larger project.
Well, I think that some people get that analysis paralysis, right? Yeah. Like where they just can't put it out there because they don't deem it to be perfect, or they've, this just isn't my favorite. Who's really going to care about this? Look, it may end up being that nobody cares about that one thing that day. But later on down the line, when people are seeing that you're being consistent with this stuff, then it's going to make a difference then. Or that one thing comes up, what's an HOA fee, and you share that blog or whatever it is with your client. It's like, I have an answer for you. And so I did 365 New Orleans, right? And it was a lot. Everybody got 5 questions, and oh my God, it's just a lot, right? And I think the thing is, when people talk to like you, or they talk to me and they talk about the consistency, they hear projects like that and they get overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do all that. That's not necessary. You don't have to be insane. You can pick something else, whether it's just you're putting out a blog once a week, or you're putting out a TikTok or an Instagram reel, or you're, just whatever it is. I think it's just finding what feels good to you and then building the momentum off that.
So what's your structure for consistency then, Leslie? Is there a piece of technology that you're using? Is there planning? Do you batch? What are some of the tricks and tips that you would give someone, enable them to be consistent?
Okay. Now, what I'm going to tell you may not work for a lot of people. The tech is not the thing for me for that portion, at least, for the blogging portion. I typically go to Mexico once a year and write about 40 to 50 blogs while I'm there for a few days. And I just have a lot of margaritas and a lot of ideas on Post-it notes that I bring with me, and I just crank it out. And then when I come home, I edit and add the photos and everything else. But the content is at least structured-ish, Mm-hmm. Or because some of them are really great. And I'm like, oh my God, this is wonderful. And there's other ones I'm like, oh God, I had one too many margaritas when I was writing that. But at least I've gotten a lot of it there. So when I'm feeling not so as inspired, I can grab one of those and go, all right, let me just edit this and just get it out there.
And that's a very interesting mindset, because it just really reinforces how important the consistency is in the overall theme. Like the idea that you wouldn't let a week go by where you would say, okay, I still have to get this one out. I'll pull this one off the shelf. I'll give it an edit and I'll put it out there, because I do not want to break the rhythm of the consistency.
I can't. I just feel like it's important to stay on top of it, because it's very easy for us to get out of the habit of that, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, 1 week. Oh, I just didn't really get anything out there, right?
And then it's 2 weeks.
And then it's 2.
Yeah.
And then it's 3. And then you're like, oh, I really haven't done anything. And it happens to a lot of people very quickly. I think it's really just getting outside of your head and going, this doesn't have to be groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. It just needs to be consistent.
Having your sister on staff, we forget that some of the basic information that people are looking for is important to them, because they're in the process of buying and selling a house. When I'm creating my content too, I want it to be fancy, but sometimes it just needs to be useful.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, for just the usefulness. Like my sister, this was a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, hey, what are the pros and cons for like co-signing on a loan for somebody? I'm like, why have I not written this? Mm-hmm. Well, like, this is so basic, because I was her co-signer when she bought her house, and she's like, we never talked about it. You just did it. But like, what if I was to do that for, her daughter down the line? She's like, I don't know what the ramifications are of that. And it was just like a moment of like, oh my God, I need to write that. You can gather inspiration a lot of places, even when you feel like that inspiration might be going away. Also, I go to other realtors' websites that are not in my community and see if they've written anything fun recently when I'm, just kind of feeling like I don't have a
Yep.
ton of inspiration. And I'm not saying copy and paste, but you look at that and go, oh, and you can get something on your own from that. Or even if they've just done a different way to like present stats, it's just, I hate to say, it's just being consistent, but it really is. Like, if you just stay on top of it, you're going to find yourself like, okay, I need to do this. It's just a part of your rhythm.
You write one blog post a week, and after a month, it's only 4. But after a year, it's 52.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's 2025, and you've got hundreds and hundreds of posts out there. It's amazing how quickly a library can be created from just being consistent. And so you've already spoken about it. I think it's something that I'm better at understanding as I take on more projects. This podcast is going to be 12 episodes per season. After the 12 episodes, I will take a month off, return 4 weeks later for another season of the 12 podcasts. I think letting the audience know that lets me be consistent, but it also safeguards from being burnt out. I can sit back in those 4 weeks. Okay, what sort of topics do we want to cover? How do you safeguard against burnout so that you're allowed to remain consistent over a long period of time?
Batching. So I have about 101 unfinished blog posts. Some of them will probably never see the light of day, right? Like I start them and they're just not going the way that I want them to. Maybe it's not something that fits well into a blog post and could just be thrown into like Instagram Live and throw it out there, right? Like not everything can really be written out. Every time I have an idea, I tell my phone Siri to remind me of it, or I put in a Post-it note, or I put it into a draft on my website immediately. So that way, when I'm having that burnout and I have zero inspiration left in me, I can at least go and I've got something to start with.
Now it's time for Been There, Done That.
Tell him he gives me a cup of coffee, I'll answer his questions.
All right, we're on to the rapid fire round of 7 questions focused on our guests' years of experience in the real estate industry. Question number 1, Leslie, you've moved to a new area. What would be the number one thing you'd be looking for in a new brokerage?
Diversity. I think it can show you so many different aspects of a community, where going into one that everyone just looks like me may not give me the full picture of the full city.
Question number 2, what advice would you give an agent who's never experienced a dramatic market shift to help them get the most out of a changing market?
I think first things first, save your money and quit spending marketing dollars. Don't just throw marketing dollars somewhere. You need to, I would say, invest that money back into your own clientele.
Question number 3, in your business today, what single activity, I think we already know this, what single activity or product gives you the best ROI of your time and or dollars?
I mean, I know blogging would seem like the obvious choice, but truly it is our client aftercare. I would love to be a past client of ours. So, we have like a private group for them to be able to ask a lot of questions to each other, who can recommend a house painter, et cetera. But every quarter we send them every house that's sold in their neighborhood and how much it's sold for. So you can constantly be nosy. We send monthly updates on sort of your home value. We do monthly giveaways. We have 4 parties a year. Oh, did you replace your roof? Guess what? I've already called your insurance guy and sent your receipt over there. We do everything we can to make sure our clients are well after the fact taken care of.
See, and this is when you hear somebody say something and you're like, that's a new blog post. Leslie Hinder is coming back for another episode talking about client care after the transaction, because I think that's really, really, really important. Question number 4, what is the worst movie you legitimately enjoy?
Oh God, you know what? I'm not even really a movie person. I watch the same TV shows over and over.
Okay. Question number 4, what is the worst TV show you legitimately enjoy?
House.
I've never seen House.
It's really not that great, but I really love that show because it makes me think that I too can just diagnose people with weird diseases. My doctor really enjoys it every time I go in there.
Love it. Question number 5, what is the best piece of business advice you've received?
Okay. Do you know Marguerite Martin?
I certainly do.
Okay. I met her in 2016, and that woman told me, own your own land, by meaning create my own website, create all my own content, and own it all myself. Do not rely on a brokerage to do all those things for me. And my mother's my broker, but she told me, all those years ago, own your own land. And I have held that so close to my heart, and it has really, I think, made the biggest difference in my business.
30,000 foot view. What is something you wished you could change about the real estate industry?
I wish realtors were sometimes kinder to each other and we just treated each other a little bit better.
Number 7, in one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
What's your cursing policy? A beautiful disaster? I don't know.
Pretty good answer.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leslie, for being my guest and spilling the beans on keys to consistency. And thank you to the listener for joining Leslie Hinder and myself for a chat about Creole Consistency at the Real Estate Coffee House. We hope it brewed up some value for you, and remember to enjoy the grind.
That's this week's episode of the Real Estate Coffee House podcast with your host, Michael Thorne. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. The Real Estate Coffee House podcast is brought to you by Thorne Maisie Bongers Real Estate Group with Remax Lifestyles Realty in Langley, BC. Thank you for listening.